DeWitt Law Review here on WDBO 107.3 FM and 580 AM, Orlando's News and Talk. Remember, the answers given on this show do not constitute legal advice and do not create an attorney-client relationship. For legal advice, you can call the office anytime at 1-800-DeWitt-LAW. That's 1-800-DeWitt-LAW, or visit DeWittLaw.com. If you want to get your legal questions answered on this show, send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's ask@DeWittLaw.com. We are here every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. talking about Florida's legal issues and how they affect you. My name is John Bustegger. Across from me is the man, the myth, the legend, attorney Moe DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Good morning, Moe.
Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. It's a beautiful day after a hurricane.
It's true. It's true. You and I survived.
I think most of Central Florida did, fortunately.
Yeah, I got a little bit of rain. I wouldn't say a lot of rain, but a little bit of rain. How about you?
Yeah, about the same. I mean, certainly better than last time when, a lot of Central Florida had quite a bit of flooding. So.
Oh, yeah. It was not so good last year.
Yeah.
The floods and storms and branches down. This year with Hurricane Idalia, at least in Central Florida. I know they're dealing with some things, other parts of the states, but we got pretty lucky where we are.
We did get lucky, but hopefully it was a good time to check your hurricane supplies, see if your generator still works, all that kind of stuff.
We're going to talk about that in a second. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about something else, the Just Call Moe Comedy Jam.
Oh, yeah, which we actually had to cancel last year because of the hurricane, but we rescheduled it for last year. But we're bringing it back again this year, so this is our second annual in-person Just Call Moe Comedy Jam, which is if you don't know, it's a comedy show that goes 100% to charity. So it's not just the proceeds, it's every dollar that we raise goes to charity. We basically pay for the comedy show, and then that money all gets donated. It's at Tuffy's in Sanford on September 15th. Have a great lineup of comedians.
Ross Pageant, maybe you know him?
Yeah, Ross Pageant from Real Radio, as well as Sabrina Ambra from Real Radio, and a bunch of other local comedians. Last year, I think it was completely sold out last year. I think there's a few hundred people out there, and it was a great time. So if you want to join us, you can go to moecomedyjam.com. You can buy tickets there. Again, all that money is going directly to charity. And it's a great charity. It's called the Yellow Brick Road Foundation, which you may have heard of here in town. They're a local charity who helps children who suffer from congenital heart defects. A lot of them are kind of bedridden in the hospital. So they help them and help their families as well.
It's a good time. I was there last year. I'll be there this year. Tickets are only $15.
Yep, they start at $15. It is a donation-based system, so you can donate more if you'd like to. And if you want to learn more about the charity, you can go to their website as well. I think it's ybrf.org. And like I said, they just do great work, and they're local here, so you kind of know it's not going to some big CEO who's taking his. It's a local charity that's kind of grassroots that's really trying to help people who need it in the community.
Yeah, it's a fun night. So go get tickets, moecomedyjam.com. We'll see you September 15th at Tuffy's in Sanford.
Yep.
So we touched on this at the beginning. Hurricanes. So let's talk about hurricanes a little bit. I mean, we live in a state where we have to deal with hurricanes a few times a year.
Yep.
I never thought I would do that. I'm not from here. I'm not from Florida. I grew up in Michigan. And I remember growing up, I'd see these maps of these weather patterns, and I'd say, oh, my gosh, I can't believe people live in a place like that where they have to deal with hurricanes. But, I mean, some can be really bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not as bad as they may seem on the weather map. I'll say this. I've said this before, Mo. I'll take a hurricane over a tornado any day.
I agree with you there. I mean, fortunately, being more central and a little bit more inland, we are a bit more protected than other parts of the state. But we still lose power and still have trees down, and homes certainly get destroyed. So it still can be certainly problematic, and just like any potential weather issue, you want to be prepared for it. And so I think as Floridians, if you lived here long enough, you hear, oh, there's another hurricane, no need to worry, and you have a hurrcane like we just did, and nothing happens. And you
go, in Central Florida.
Yeah, I should clarify that, because it is hitting up in the northern part of the state, or did. And so, you get a little too comfortable for them, and then, you do get a bad one, and you're not prepared for it. So, I mean, I remember when we had, what was it? There was a summer where we got like 3 in a row. I think
that was before my time, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember we were out without power, at least in our house, for 2 or 3 weeks at that time. I remember going to, friends of friends' houses to take showers and stuff like that, because they happened to get electricity back. So it can be, quite problematic, obviously. And of course, there's a whole nother show and a whole nother conversation, but what that does to our homeowners insurance here in Florida is another issue. And that's partially why our rates are so high, obviously, in the state. But yeah, I mean, even though we got lucky in Central Florida on this one, it is a good idea to still make sure you're prepared. Like I said, make sure your generators work. And
it's early too. I mean, it's only September right now. By the time the show airs, it's September. We got to at least November.
Yeah.
And maybe longer. You really don't know.
Yeah. And if you bought a bunch of water, put that away, have that stored away, have your flashlights, your batteries. It's kind of good just to have a little supply ready to go. That way, if another hurricane or another storm does come through, you're not racing out to Publix with the madhouse of people trying to grab everything you need at the last minute.
So Mo, this is a legal show.
Yeah.
I know during hurricanes things can get damaged from trees, from debris flying around. Windows get broken, cars get broken. But I know you can't sue a hurricane.
Well, we could try, but no, you can't. Yeah.
But there are maybe some legal protections you can do, and some tips on insurance and how to sort of take photos of those things, and what can people do leading up to a hurricane and even after a hurricane when it comes to their valuables.
I mean, it's always a good idea, if there's a hurricane coming in the area, to take some pictures of the exterior of your home, take some pictures of your vehicle. If you have a drone and you can fly it over the roof, that's fantastic.
Oh, there you go.
Because you don't want the insurance company to argue that it was pre-existing. I mean, that's always the problem. Is they say, oh, that damage was probably there. That doesn't look like it came from a hurricane. I mean, I have a buddy who his parents lived down in Fort Myers, and he got hit. They got hit by that bad storm a year or two ago.
Yeah.
I forget which one it was, but
it was Ian.
Ian, yeah. The hurricane insurance said that there was no wind damage to the house, and they go, wait a second, there's no roof on the house. They go, well, that was from the water, not from the wind. And it's like, well, how do you know that? I mean,
sounds like a Captain Planet problem there. Wind and water.
Right. I mean, a hurricane is a lot of wind, so you telling us that that's not wind damage seems a little ridiculous, and they denied the claim based on that. But that's the kind of stuff you're going to have to deal with. And obviously, in that situation, photos wouldn't really help. But the more documentation you have showing that, hey, the roof was in good shape, the property was in good shape until the storm came through, that usually proves to be very helpful if there are issues with the insurance company.
And so, as I said jokingly earlier, you really can't sue a hurricane for damage, but there may be some instances, it sounds like, where you can sue the insurance company if it gets to where they start saying, well, that tree limb fell on its own, not because of the hurricane, and your car's just sort of out of luck, I guess, and you're out of luck. So at some point, you can maybe start suing the insurance company if you have to.
Yeah, and that happens all the time, obviously, when they refuse to pay. Like I said, and that's, it seems like something that's completely ridiculous that someone would argue that, the roof missing from a hurricane is not wind damage. But you see these kind of arguments from insurance companies all the time because at the end of the day, I don't mean to sit here and bash insurance companies, but we deal with it. At the end of the day, they're a business. They want to pay you out as little money as possible. And so they're going to come up with reasons to deny claims or reduce claims and things like that. And that's why it's just good to be prepared, just like anything else in life, and make sure you have the documentation you need if that happens. Hopefully it doesn't, but if that happens, you're prepared.
So how would you go about proving that? So let's say a tree limb falls on my car, and I say the hurricane did it. I mean, maybe that's not a great example, but something like that. Like, how do you even go about saying, well, no, that was the hurricane. That wasn't just me being, careless. That was something made that happen. And then if the insurance company says, well, we don't believe you, prove it.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, the jury is the great equalizer, right? So if you file a lawsuit against the insurance company and ultimately it goes to court and goes to it in front of a jury,
a Florida jury,
they have to make that argument to the jury. And, that's what I kind of love about some of this stuff is you can argue that to me and I'm going to roll my eyes and I'm going to tell you that's ridiculous. And they're going to say, oh, no, absolutely. This is definitely the case. But by the time they then have to give that argument to their attorney, and that attorney has to stand in front of a jury with a straight face and say there was no wind damage from this giant storm
that had 130 mile an hour winds.
Right. And so, anyone who's lived in Florida for 5 minutes is not going to buy that argument. But the problem is that it takes years to get a case to a jury.
Yeah. So what do you do in the meantime?
Right. And partially what they're banking on is that people will just give up, that they don't have the patience, that, they need the money right away to get their house fixed. They're living in probably temporary housing in the meantime. So they drag it out as long as possible, which is horrible to think about. But that's part of the strategy as well, is delay benefits them. The longer they delay, they don't have to pay money out. So, they say, sure, take it to court. We'll see you in front of a jury in 2 years. Now, the flip side of that is a jury may award the person a lot more money. And, that's part of what this last insurance reform bill got rid of, so there's not as much risk to them anymore. But historically, they could be awarded a lot more money if the insurance company acted in bad faith. And so that's why we had those bad faith laws, was to kind of keep the insurance companies to be more honest, because they had the risk of getting hit with a higher verdict in the end. Now it's harder to do that because of those insurance reform laws. So I'm not too optimistic that the insurance company is going to act in good faith. And it's kind of ridiculous that we need a law to say you have to act in good faith when doing insurance. But they got rid of that. Doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. So
are there lawyers, are there attorneys that specialize like in hurricane damage or hurricane or storm damage or whatever?
Yeah, there's lawyers who specialize in property damage cases. Again, a lot of that industry was kind of wiped out by this insurance reform that we got. But certainly when, with the amount of hurricanes and tornadoes and everything that we have in the state, those were kind of statewide practices. And obviously when a storm came through, there was a few law firms that would handle a lot of those claims. And typically you don't need a lawyer right away if there's a hurricane. You need a lawyer if the insurance company is not being fair with you or denying the claim or whatever it may be. That's when you typically get a lawyer involved.
What about when it comes to valuables? So let's say I live on the coast, and let's say a storm comes through and there's a big flood and my house gets flooded, and valuables, I'm thinking jewelry or electronics or whatever, and that stuff just gets wiped away. How does that work? Do they just say, okay, this was all worth such and such, here's a check, or like I would assume you'd have to document some of that stuff to get reimbursed for it?
Yeah, typically you'll have to provide some sort of list, but your insurance policy is going to have a limit for the contents of your home.
Okay, so that Monet I have in my home. I
mean, there's a great episode of Married with Children where Al Bundy's 1967 Dodge gets stolen, and he says, I had a Picasso in the trunk or something like that. They find the car and the Picasso's safe, so the insurance company didn't have to pay on that one. But yeah, typically you have to list out the items that were missing, or that were destroyed rather. But there's also going to be a cap based on your policy. So it's a good idea to look at that cap and kind of say, is that cap reasonable or no? If it's $5,000 and you have to refurnish your whole house for $5,000, obviously that's not going to be enough. So that is one thing to look at when you're purchasing homeowners insurance. I know nowadays when we purchase homeowners insurance, we're just trying to get the cheapest policy possible, but you still want to make sure that what you have actually covers you in case you actually have to use the insurance.
Is that the same with cars? And what I mean by that is here in Central Florida last year during Hurricane Ian, a lot of cars were flooded out.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people know if your car gets flooded out, it's probably never going to be the same again, may not even start. I mean, can you get your car reimbursed like that? Or they're like, you should have parked it somewhere else?
Well, typically that's part of the property damage portion of your insurance policy, assuming that you have comprehensive insurance for the vehicle. Again, that's something that's good to look at as far as, do you just have the bare minimum coverage where if you hit somebody else, that covers, just what you need to cover? Or do you have the coverage where if you're insured, if your car gets stolen or flooded or you crash and it's your fault and gets destroyed, that you still have coverage there? So those are the questions to ask your insurance broker when you're purchasing insurance. As we've talked about before, you want to have enough insurance to cover the value of the vehicle, of course. And I always recommend having uninsured motorist coverage as well.
So we only have another minute left. As we said, a hurricane came through. There's probably going to be another one that comes through Florida. If you haven't done some things, what would you tell people to do to prepare for the next one?
Well, I mean, I was kind of thinking about this myself, honestly. It's just, make sure I have enough of those, backup battery packs, make sure the generator's working, which I didn't do this time. I was just hoping it would start if we lost power. Just get a couple cases of water, put them in your closet somewhere so you have them, and maybe just some, non-perishable food that you have around. That way, if something comes through, you have kind of the basic necessities that you need. Of course, if you have medical issues or health issues, make sure you have enough stuff to kind of take care of whatever those issues are as well. But I think it's just good to kind of think about that a little bit. Think about, okay, if we do lose power for a week or two, what do I need? What's my plan here? And make sure that you have this stuff already ready to go so you're not running out at the last minute. And
also maybe take photos of your house, take photos of your yard, take photos of your vehicle, and maybe even take photos of your insurance policy or put it somewhere in a plastic bag.
Well, know where it is and know the phone number to call. I mean, know who your insurance company is a good start. From there you can probably find out who to contact after these hurricanes. The other problem is the insurance companies get so flooded with calls that they get quite the backlog for somebody to even come out and look at things. But it's good to at least notify them right away and get your name on the list.
All right, Mo, we got to take a break.
All right.
Don't go anywhere. We got all kinds of questions to answer, your legal questions. And if you have them, send those to ask@DeWittLaw.com. We'll be right back.
We just got this client $25,000. I don't show it to you because it's a giant check. The important thing here is the initial offer was only $2,500. That means we got them 10 times the initial offer. Without an attorney, in my opinion, he would have never gotten this amount. The insurance company's own study shows that when you have an attorney, on average, you get over 3 times more than those who go out it alone. In this case, we got 10 times more. Injured on the go? Just call Mo.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review here on WDBO 107.3 FM and 580 AM, Orlando's News and Talk. Here on the show, we talk about legal issues in Florida and how they affect you. I'm John Bustegger. I'm with attorney Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. If you got legal questions, send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's ask@DeWittLaw.com. You can also call the DeWitt Law Firm at 1-800-DeWitt-Law. And Mo, we got lots of questions this week.
We do have a lot of questions to get through, so hopefully we can get through them all.
We'll see. So first question, I got to read the first part of this because I like it.
All right.
It says, good morning. First, absolutely enjoy the radio program. I wish you would consider doing a podcast.
Well, we put this show out as a podcast. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. I don't know if he means a separate podcast or not. But if you look on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever I guess you get podcasts for DeWitt Law Review, all the shows are posted there as a podcast. So you can certainly find it there and listen to us wherever and whenever you want.
There you go. So if you miss us at 10 a.m. on Sunday, you can always go and look for us on, like you said, all the major podcast services, DeWitt Law Review. You can go back and listen to just some old episodes as well. So that was the first part, but here's the actual question. First question, my bank offers paid on death accounts and or paid on death registration documents. My question is, if one has this designation on their banking account, will the state of Florida still require probate court action?
So typically with paid on death accounts, the actual account itself doesn't go through probate. So that's paid to somebody upon death. And usually that's a good idea if there's somebody who's going to need the money in the meantime. Because if everything's going through probate, it can take quite a bit of time. Maybe they need funds to maintain the estate, pay bills, whatever that may be. So this kind of gives them access to some instant money right there. Now, typically, it's not going to be your entire estate in those bank accounts. And, of course, you always want to talk to an estate planning attorney to do a comprehensive estate plan. But that is the purpose of those accounts, basically. If you pass away, the other person has access to those funds, can get access to those funds, and they don't have to go through probate typically.
So the second part of that question, he says, my wife is in a nursing home, private pay. She is in a semi-coma state. Unfortunately, she and I have no family left. Additionally, all my friends have passed. What, if any, legal instruments or oversight which will ensure her medical payments are continued after my death? So if he passes away before her, what happens?
Well, first, I'm sorry to hear about your wife. I know that's got to be a very tough situation that you're dealing with and a lot of burden on your shoulders. The best thing to do in a situation like this is typically to set up a trust that will provide for her medical needs if something happens to you. Now, you mentioned all your friends have kind of passed away. You can have an attorney or a bank appointed as the fiduciary or the trustee over that trust so that they can make some decisions if necessary. They're basically professional trustees who do that. So again, that's something to talk about with an estate planning attorney. But I think a trust is probably the best way to do that and ensure that her medical needs are taken care of in the event that something happens to you.
All right. Well, thank you for those questions. And yeah, go look for our podcast if you want to hear some old episodes. All right. We got another one before the break here. Okay. This is from Michael. He lives in Ocoee. What's the process for contesting a traffic ticket in Florida?
Well, typically you just have to file notice that you're contesting it within, I think it's 14 days, but check the ticket. The ticket usually says, and then there's going to be a hearing in front of a traffic court officer. Sometimes people hire, traffic ticket attorneys to handle that, but that's kind of the process in a nutshell. I know we're about to go to break here, so maybe we can go into more details when we come back.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, Mo.
All right.
We'll be right back. I do want to mention before we go to break, tickets to our comedy jam. While we were on the air, we sold like 5 tickets.
All right.
Can't beat that.
Nope, not at all.
So if you want tickets to our comedy jam, it's mocomedyjam.com. September 15th at Tuffy's. It's going to be a fun night. Second time we've ever done this.
7 p.m.
Doors at 7. Show starts at 8.
There you go.
But we got some great comedians, great local comedians. It's a really fun time. We sold out last year. We're definitely going to sell out this year. So if you want to go, mocomedyjam.com. Get those tickets. We'll see you at Tuffy's on September 15th. Mo, I got a bunch more questions.
All right. I'll stick around then.
Listeners as well. We got a lot of questions. If you got questions, send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's ask@DeWittLaw.com. We try to answer every single question we get on this show. So send them our way, and we will be right back.
So I got a call from a guy last night who was in a pretty bad car accident. He was behind a work truck, essentially. Some items fell off the work truck, went through his windshield, smashed up his windshield, and hurt his hand really bad. So the insurance company reached out to him right after the accident, and he was at first concerned about getting his windshield fixed. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but his hand was all banged up and really needed to see a doctor about his hand, especially because he does construction work and that's kind of his livelihood. But he was concerned about getting his car fixed, getting it back on the road so he could start driving. So the insurance company sent him some paperwork, and he signed it. And the problem is that paperwork was a release. So basically, he released the at-fault party from any and all liability for a little over $400, basically, which means he can never go after them again. So he called us to see if we can help them. Unfortunately, in this case, we can't help him. He released the other side completely, and frankly, there's nothing we can do. And that's why it's always so important that you speak to an attorney before you ever sign any paperwork with the insurance company. Worst case scenario is the attorney's gonna say, yep, you're good to sign it, good to go. Worst case, or best case scenario, it'll save you from something like this. So before you ever sign a release, before you ever sign any paperwork with the insurance company, reach out to an injury attorney. Most injury attorneys won't charge you a dime to talk to you and take a look at that and try to help you with it. Unfortunately for this individual, it's a little too late, but hopefully somebody else out there can learn from his story and hopefully avoid making the same mistake he did.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review here on WDBO 107.3 FM and 580 AM, Orlando's News and Talk. Here on the show, we talk about legal issues in Florida and how they affect you. I'm John Busdecker. I'm with attorney Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. If you got legal questions, we got legal answers. Send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's ask@DeWittLaw.com. You can also call the firm at 1-800-DeWitt-Law. That's 1-800-DeWitt-Law. Mo?
John.
What'd you do during the break?
Got a little water.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You're a little parched.
That's loud.
All those questions. Yeah. All those questions you're answering, you get a little parched. So it's okay if you get some water. You should get one of those Camelbacks. You can just drink it while you're answering the questions.
I don't think this show is that intense.
No?
But maybe one day.
I don't know. It feels like we're hiking up a mountain sometimes when you're answering these questions. All right. This one's a bit of a long question, so you can chill for a second over there, Mo, and I'll read it. All right. This one is came in the other day. It says, I was with my ex for 5 years. We bought a home together in January of 2021, and we broke up in June of this year. We listed our home on July 25th, 2023, by owner. I agreed to list the home by owner as per my ex's request, or she was going to refuse to list the home at all.
Okay.
I want to hire a realtor, but she is continuing to refuse because she does not want to pay the realtor. My ex doesn't even live in the home. She works in Orlando, but she is living in Miami with her new girlfriend. I want a realtor so they can help us market the home and get it sold ASAP. My ex is dragging out this process, and I want to know if it is possible to take her to court so that a judge can pick a realtor for us and make my ex agree to list the home.
Yeah, so that's what we call a partition action, basically. So, you should be aware anytime you buy property with another person, property in Florida is considered to be indivisible, meaning you can't just cut the house in half and give half to one person, half to the other.
That's what they do on sitcoms in the 80s.
That's why it's a sitcom. So you have to file what we call a partition action, where basically you're forcing the sale of the home. And typically the courts are either going to force the sale of the home with a real estate agent or with, or they can force a courthouse step type sale where it's sold at auction. Essentially.
That sounds like the worst of the two.
It is. And, typically judges these days, I don't think I've ever had a judge actually do that. They usually order that a real estate agent be appointed to handle the sale. And once you file that action, really, there's no question that the house is going to be sold unless the other party buys the other party out. It's just a matter of, who's going to sell it for what price, kind of the details of it. So if this person wants to kind of force the sale, they can do that by filing a partition action. Now, of course, there's attorney's fees and other fees associated with that. So you want to carefully consider those and see if it's worth doing or not. But that is, basically your option there, given the circumstances. So I do kind of caution people, oftentimes people will add other, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, longtime significant other, they'll add them to the deed, and maybe they don't really think about the consequence of what happens if we break up. And, maybe they do it for estate planning purposes or whatever it may be. There's certain ways you should do those kinds of things, because if the other party didn't put any money into the house and then they want to be difficult, and you have to bring the partition action, and then there's a whole dispute over who gets what out of the home, what percentage is each person entitled to, especially if they didn't contribute to the household, contribute to the purchase of the house, I should say. It can be very contested and difficult to unwind, and then you have to go back and find proof of what you paid. And if you've owned the house for 10 years, I mean, a lot of people don't have those receipts, because why would you think to keep them?
Yeah.
So it can become quite difficult. So before you ever kind of go into a big purchase like that with another person, it's a good idea to kind of research it thoroughly, speak to an attorney, make sure you're doing things properly, and make sure that the reason you're doing them, or your goal with it rather, is going to be accomplished by the method that you're using.
All right, Mo, next question.
All right.
This one's about child custody and taxes. I have a custody agreement in place that notes my son's father and I are to alternate each year in claiming my son for taxes. I claimed him 2 years in a row, but the second year was the start of an agreement to alternate. What laws have I broken, if any? How could this impact my custody agreement? How should I proceed?
So, you haven't really broken any laws per se. What you've done is, it sounds like you violated the court order saying that the tax exemption was going to be rotated every year. And, if you violate a court order enough, the court is going to, issue sanctions. The court could modify the agreement if they just feel that you're not going to follow any of the court's orders. So there can be consequences for that. It sounds like you're trying to make this right here, and you're trying to, fix it essentially. So, typically in a situation like this, you can probably go back and you want to speak to an accountant or CPA about this and file an amended tax return to correct the situation for whatever year it is that you need to correct. And then from there, going forward, just make sure you're complying with the terms of the agreement. Frankly, usually what we see is the other side keeps filing every year, and then we have to file a motion for contempt against them to get them to correct the situation, because they're taking the tax credit, or they both take the tax credit, and then they have an issue with the IRS that has to be sorted out. And those can be messier situations. Mm-hmm. Here, it sounds like this person's trying to do the right thing. They just need to know how to do it, essentially.
All right. That's good advice, Mo.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
All right. This one's about divorce. It sounds like this woman was married for 21 years. She said the house was purchased prior to the marriage. She's looking to stay in the house as well as get some alimony. They have a child, but he will turn 18 in February. He's heading to college next year. That's kind of the end of the question. So my question is, I'm assuming her question is like, what should I do when it comes to being married for 21 years, and how is it going to affect her maybe alimony and staying in the house? Like, what would you recommend?
Well, I think she said the house was bought prior to the marriage,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So let's start with that. I mean, basically, you've been married it's a long-term marriage.
21
in Florida.
years.
Yeah, anything over 20 years is considered a long-term marriage in Florida. But the house was purchased, prior to the marriage. So that's what we call the Call formula in Florida. It's KAAA, which is a Florida Supreme Court case. And what it basically says is, while the house is premarital, any increase in the value or the equity of the home that was acquired during that marriage, during that 21 years, is going to become marital. So she's entitled to half of basically the increase in value or equity over those 21 years. And given what the real estate market's done here in Florida, most likely that's a significant amount of money. So if she were to move forward from a divorce from a financial perspective, she would be entitled to 1/2 of that increase. Now, if she has the money, she could buy the other party out of the home, or the other party could buy her out of the home, or they could sell the home and split those proceeds accordingly, according to how the formula plays out, essentially. Now, considering that she's a long-term marriage, she gets alimony up to 75% of the marriage. So 21 years, 75% of that. And then the actual amount of alimony is going to be based on need and ability to pay. So we'd have to go into each party's income. What income does she have? What income does the other party have? And look at, what her potential need is and what the other party's potential ability to pay is. Now, obviously, with the alimony reform statute, that has changed a little bit. There are some formulaic calculations and caps put on that now. But that's the types of thing that we're going to be looking at when we're analyzing the alimony.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, Mo, I might have one that's going to stump you here.
We'll
I know
try.
every time I ask a question, I feel like you have a pretty good answer. And this one, I don't think we've ever asked a question about this. So are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. This is from Eric. He lives in Celebration, just outside of Walt Disney World, if you're not familiar.
Okay.
Are there any restrictions on selling homemade food products in Florida?
I mean, I think you probably did something on that one.
Oh!
I would assume there probably are.
Okay.
I mean, typically you have to have food like that made in a commissary kitchen that complies with health codes and things like that. Now, that being said, I mean, people do it all the time and they have bake sales and stuff like that. Maybe there's an exemption for that. I'm not sure.
There you go. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
Go.
We stumped Mo on this one. I'm not a lawyer. Obviously you are, but I do think when you get to a certain point, like you're right, I think you can do a baked goods sale. And that's no problem. But when you get to a certain point in your business, it becomes, you got to have things tested. You got to make sure there's food inspectors, all that stuff. You can't just,
it's a health and safety issue.
Yeah. So, all right. You're not an expert at homemade food goods. It's good to know. It's good to know you don't know everything about the law. Just a lot.
Never proclaim to know everything.
All right. This is from Samantha. She lives over in the Conway area of Orlando. Can I be evicted without proper notice from my landlord?
Well, I think the question in and of itself implies that you cannot, because she says proper notice. So, typically for eviction proceedings, depending on why you're getting evicted, there has to be proper notice pursuant to statutes and your lease, essentially showing that you violated the terms of your lease somehow. Depending on the reason for eviction, typically you're given a timeline to cure the issue. Sometimes it may be, let's say you have an unauthorized pet in the apartment or the home or whatever it may be. They give you a certain amount of time to cure those kinds of issues. If it's non-payment of rent, that's a shorter time to cure. But there is a statute that governs all this, and they have to comply with it. So, when you say they didn't give you proper notice, that tells me that there's something wrong there. And there's also specific ways that you have to serve the notices too. So you have to be very careful if you are a landlord to make sure you're complying with that. Another thing I saw a landlord get into trouble with the other day was the security deposit issue. When you give someone their security deposit back at the end of the lease, or you make a claim on the security deposit, there is a statute that says exactly how you have to do that. And if you don't comply with it exactly, you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So you want to make sure that you're complying with that strictly.
What if they're doing something illegal in the house? Like, let's say, and I'm just throwing things out there. Let's say you're renting to somebody and either you suspect or or even they got arrested. Let's say they have like a meth lab in their house. Can you immediately evict somebody if they're doing something like that, or is there still a process?
Well, typically, if they have a meth lab in the house, just call the cops, but that'll pretty much take care of
That's
them.
the only thing I can think of that was so bad. I mean, that would be so bad that you kick them out right away.
But typically, most well-written leases have provisions in there saying that they can't violate any municipal ordinances, zoning laws, statutory laws, etc. And they put in the zoning laws and things like that because they don't want people, running an auto shop out of the garage. While that's illegal, the police may not be so inclined to show up right away and arrest the people for it. So typically, if your lease is well drafted, it's going to have some of those provisions in it, basically saying that, hey, this is the specific use for this property. It's for you to live in there. A lot of times they have limits on the amount of people who can live there for an extended period of time because they don't want you leasing the property, then moving 20 of your friends in or running it as an Airbnb or a hostel or whatever. So that all comes down to having that well-written lease where it really states the specific purpose of the property and then says, obviously, if you don't comply or don't use the property for this purpose, we can then move to evict you. Again, they typically have to give you time to cure that deficiency before they're allowed to evict you right off the bat. But if you don't cure it, then they can move forward with eviction proceedings.
All right. Next question, Mo. This is from Anthony. He lives over in Baldwin Park, nice part of Orlando.
Yep, right around the corner.
Yeah, not too far from the DeWitt Law Firm offices in downtown Orlando. Come by and visit us anytime. 135 West Central Boulevard. We'll give you some Mo merch if you come by during business hours.
Of course.
Don't come here at midnight. We ain't gonna be here at midnight. Mo might be here at midnight working on cases, but
I don't answer the door at those hours.
No. Unless it's Halloween, you'll just get some trick or treaters maybe. All right, here we go, Mo. Anthony, living in Baldwin Park. Can I sue my neighbor for their tree roots damaging my property?
Well, if we want to know what how the damage is, what's the damage to your property? So typically with trees, if the tree limb hangs over your property, you can trim that limb back to the property line to prevent the damage. Now, I would assume the same would kind of apply with the roots. You could cut the roots out to prevent the damage from going towards your yard. Now, obviously, that could possibly kill the tree. So, the proper thing to do would obviously be to talk with your neighbor about it. But if they're not willing to work it out with you, and again, tree law is not my expertise by any means.
You're more of a bird law lawyer.
More bird law. But I would assume that the same principle applies to the roots that it does to the branches. Now, when things go underground, and I took a whole class in law school about mineral rights and oil rights. That can get a little complicated where it is on the property because there's things going on. I'm going on a tangent here, but there would be an oil reserve that was under a bunch of properties, but it was just a little bit on one guy's property. He could drill into it from his property, but he could suck out the entire oil reserve.
That's what happened in There Will Be Blood in the movie.
Right. So there's all these kind of crazy laws when you start going underground. But for a case of a tree like this, I would assume the same principle applies. If the roots are on your property, if they're damaging your property, you can cure it up to the property line if you need to.
All right, Mo, we got to take a break.
All right.
You study up on your tree law.
I'll get to work.
All right. And if you got questions, send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review here on WDBO 107.3 FM and 580 AM, Orlando's News and Talk. Here on the show, we talk about legal issues in Florida and how they affect you. I'm John Bustecker. I'm with attorney Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. If you have legal questions, send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's ask@DeWittLaw.com. You can also call the firm at 1-800-DeWitt Law. Mo, have you ever seen the movie The Firm?
Yeah, it's been a while, though.
Yeah. It's just like that when you work here, right?
Not quite.
It's been a while since I've seen it, too. I think I read the book, actually, too.
Yeah, I think I did read the book as well.
That's why you're a lawyer.
I read.
All right. All right, Mo, we got a few more questions before we're done today. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Next question. This one is from Rachel.
All right.
She lives in Tampa. Is there a statute of limitations on personal injury claims?
Yeah, and so we talk about this a lot. So the statute of limitations just got shortened under this new insurance reform bill. So it used to be 4 years. Now it's 2 years on most claims. You know, each claim's different. Medical malpractice is shorter than some other claims, or was, I guess. So if you're ever in an accident, you think you may have a claim, it's always a good idea to speak to an attorney right away, because statute of limitations can get complicated in certain situations. And also, a case just never gets better with age. You know, waiting around for a long period of time, evidence disappears, witnesses disappear. So it doesn't help your case at all, frankly. So there is a statute of limitations, but, you know, like I said, you want to make sure you're acting as soon as possible. However, I've had cases before where, you know, people were in an accident, and, you know, they talked to some attorneys, and the attorneys told them that there wasn't any insurance, or they didn't think there was any insurance. So they kind of ignored it. And then they called us, you know, a year later, and we were able to help them and find insurance and make a recovery for them. So it's not, if you were in a claim, you know, can't talk today. If you're in an accident like a year ago and you think you may have a claim, it's always a good idea to still reach out to an attorney, get a second opinion, have them evaluate it. But in general, you know, cases don't get better with age, so you want to act as soon as possible after any accident.
All right. This one's from Jennifer. She lives out in Daytona Beach.
All right.
Nice. Must be nice living by the beach, right?
Hey. Yeah, why
World's
not?
most famous.
That's what they say.
Aha. All right. Can I be held liable if someone gets food poisoning from an event I catered?
So you can. I mean, just like any other business, you have a duty to make sure people who utilize your product, or, you know, in this case, consume your food, are safe. Now, the issue becomes with food poisoning is it becomes very difficult to trace the causation of it, to trace, you know, that you ate this product from this restaurant and it caused you to get sick, because you could have a stomach bug, you could have eaten something that morning, the night prior, that caused you to become sick. So a lot of times, even though people, you know, in their mind, they want to say, oh, I got food poisoning from this specific item at this specific restaurant, you know, from a legal perspective, that just becomes very difficult to prove on a causation standpoint. Now, of course, it helps if you're serving food and a lot of people get sick from that food. Obviously, that strengthens the case, showing that, hey, this food was tainted in some way. It caused all these people to get sick, and then it's easier to bring that claim. But any sort of food poisoning cases or cases along those lines, causation is always the issue, showing that this food actually caused you to get sick.
Do you remember the case in, I think it was Seminole County, where the woman put marijuana?
Yeah, I do
in
remember that case.
It was a wedding,
Right.
And the caterer put marijuana in some of the food, unbeknownst to a lot of the guests, and some of
Which
the
is
guests got
bizarre
sick. Oh yeah,
to
it
begin
really
with.
was.
Right.
Yeah, and that woman, she got in big trouble for it.
Right. Well, there, you know, just like anything else, you're putting a substance into people's bodies that they didn't consent to. You know, I mean, you're basically poisoning people. I know it's marijuana versus an actual poison, but it's kind of the same idea as you're giving a drug to these people when they didn't consent to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's not real good.
Not a good idea
by
to do
any
that.
means. And why a caterer would even think to do that is kind of
Bizarre.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. It doesn't make any sense, frankly.
All right, this is from Morgan. Morgan lives in Brevard County as well. Doesn't list the city here, but somewhere in Brevard County.
All right.
How do I go about getting a restraining order against someone who is stalking me?
Okay. So, I mean, typically you want to go down to the courthouse, and if you go to the courthouse, you can typically ask the deputy when you walk in where you go to fill out the paperwork for an injunction, which is same thing as a
Fancy
restraining
word
order. Yeah.
of saying restraining order.
And so, you know, typically they have an area where you go and they'll give you a packet of paperwork. You'll tell them why they're there, and you'll fill out this paperwork asking for an injunction for protection against stalking. Now, stalking is a little bit more difficult of an injunction to get because you do have to typically show that there's a repeated pattern of somebody, you know, stalking you for an illegitimate purpose. And that's kind of the key there is that, you know, let's say let's say it's a process server who keeps showing up at your door, they have a legitimate purpose of being there because they're trying to serve you paperwork. So if the person has some sort of legitimate purpose, then it's not stalking. But when you fill out that paperwork, you want to be very detailed into how many times that person has been stalking you, where you've seen them, how you know they're stalking you, and that they have no legitimate purpose to contact you. Sometimes it even helps, again, depending on the situation. Maybe it's a prior romantic relationship or something like that, that you've told them stop contacting me, and that way they don't have any legitimate argument that they were contacting you to give you back your property or something like that. We've seen these defenses before. So typically once you fill out that paperwork, you're going to sign it, and that's going to go to a judge to review. If the judge finds that it's sufficient, they're going to issue a temporary injunction that will then be served on the other person. And then there'll be what we call a return hearing, where it'll basically be the final injunction hearing, where the judge hears from both sides and makes a determination as to whether there is a sufficient basis for an injunction. Now, the judge could not issue the temporary injunction and still have the final hearing. And the only difference there is the injunction wouldn't be in place in the meantime. If the judge issues the temporary injunction, then once that person is served with it, if they go near you or violate the terms of that temporary injunction, then they could be arrested and face criminal charges from there.
All right, Mo, that's it. We got to go.
We're out of time already?
We are out of time.
Time flies.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week. If you got questions, send those questions to ask@DeWittLaw.com. And if you'd like, join us at the Moe Comedy Jam on
Absolutely.
September 15th at Tuffy's in Sanford. Get those tickets at MoeComedyJam.com.
And have a great Labor Day weekend.